So here's today's Bible trivia question. Who's the person that Jesus singled out as having the strongest faith of anyone he'd ever met? If you already read my sermon, don't answer. Those of you who haven't, what are some possibilities? Woman with the 2 coins. The woman with the 2 coins, 2 copper coins. It's a great answer, but no. Did have great faith, but not the strongest. Yep. Say it again. A leper, good answer. There was one leper who came back and gave thanks after he was healed. Person of great faith, but not the greatest. Nope. Roman centurion, there you go. Roman centurion. In the 8th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, he tells this story about a centurion who came to Jesus seeking healing for his paralyzed servant. And Jesus immediately said, "I'll go with you and cure him." But the officer said, "Lord, I am not worthy to have you under my roof. But only say the word, and he will be healed. For I, too, am a man under authority, and I have soldiers under me, and I say to one, 'Come,' and he comes. And I say to another, 'Go,' and he goes. And I say to my slave, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard his words, he was astonished and said to those who were following him, "In all of Israel, I have not found faith such as this." Do you catch the significance of that story? Matthew wrote his gospel to a Jewish audience. And he told his readers that the person Jesus singled out as having the greatest faith of anyone in all of Israel was not a Jew, was not a native Galilean, was not one of the disciples. It was a foreign soldier, an officer in the occupation army who was garrisoned in Galilee. Today in our worship, the gospel challenges us to think more deeply about the way we relate to strangers, to people who are outside of our own referent group, people who are unknown to us, people with different outward appearances, who look and dress and talk and believe differently than we do. Will you join me in prayer? Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, one of the commandments that we have all grown up with is the commandment, "Thou shalt not talk to strangers." Right? It wasn't on Moses' top 10 list, but it is in our cultural decalogue. When we were children, our parents warned us not to talk to people we don't know when we went downtown and milled with the crowd of people there. Or when we were browsing through the racks loaded with merchandise in crowded stores, or when we were sitting next to strangers on public transit. Every year, the police officer who came to visit our Fullerton grade school warned us about talking with strangers. They were dangerous people out there, trying to befriend you, trying to win your trust so that they could take advantage of you once you let your guard down. Lurking among strangers are thieves and child molesters and kidnappers and murderers. As children, we learned to be suspicious of strangers who are friendly towards us, who were nice to us, who offered us candy and rides in their cars. Don't talk to strangers. It's one of the commandments that we all grew up with. And there is risk attached to talking with strangers. There are dangerous people in the world, people who are so consumed by their own pain and their own anger over the injustices they have suffered in life that the only way they can feel better is to inflict pain on someone else. There are people who are mentally unstable, whose thought processes are distorted by paranoid projections and disillusional beliefs. There are people who are so isolated, so bereft of meaningful human contact that they have lost their capacity for empathy and live their lives without any concern about the impact that their behavior has on others. There is risk involved in talking with strangers. But the truth is, we're much more likely to be harmed by the people we know and trust. The first suspects in any homicide investigation are immediate family members, and then close friends, and then coworkers, and then acquaintances. When there's a homicide investigation, police don't rush out looking for strangers to interrogate. They know that most murders are committed by relatives or acquaintances, people who were known and trusted by the victims. And yet, our fear of strangers is deeply rooted in our cultural psyche. We see them as being dangerous, threatening, devious. We don't believe that strangers share the same values, beliefs, aspirations that we do. Even if we don't feel physically threatened by them, psychologically, we don't expect strangers to accept us and value us in the same way that our family and friends do. We know that we are appreciated for who we are by our family and friends, but approaching a stranger puts us at risk of being rejected, of being judged unworthy of their time and interests, of failing to win their approval or acceptance. By talking to strangers, we put ourselves at risk of rejection. Even here at church, when our worship is finished and we go out into the courtyard for coffee and fellowship, we tend to seek out the people that we know and trust. We enjoy their company, and we look forward to catching up with them. But people who are strangers to us are often left standing alone in a room filled with people. We don't approach them. We don't reach out to them. We don't initiate contact with them simply because we don't know them. Talking with strangers moves us outside of our comfort zones. But in the Gospels, Jesus is always talking with strangers. It drives the disciples crazy. They try to limit his exposure to just the lost sheep of Israel, but these strangers keep coming to him and intruding in his time, drawing his attention. People from different cultures, different races, different religions, different lifestyles. And every encounter that Jesus has with a stranger ends in a blessing, either for Jesus or for the strangers. A Syrophoenician woman hounded Jesus for days, calling for him to heal her daughter who was tormented by a demon. And the persistence of her faith inspired Jesus to broaden his perspective on Gentiles. After initially turning her away, Jesus eventually commended her, saying, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you according to your will." A Gerasene man, possessed by a legion of demons, was healed by Jesus and immediately wanted to follow him, but Jesus said, "No, stay where you are. Share your faith with your own people." And the man from Gerasene became a great evangelist as he began proclaiming in the Decapolis how Jesus had touched his life, and everyone was amazed. John's gospel tells us that some Greeks came to see Jesus, and initially the disciples tried to turn them away, but Jesus welcomed them and taught them in parables, telling them about a seed that must first fall to the ground and die before it can bring forth fruit. And then he invited these Greeks to come and follow him. The Gospels are full of stories of Jesus talking with strangers, taking an interest in their lives, getting up close and personal with them. He put his fingers in the ear of a man from Tyre and then spit and touched his tongue, and his ears were opened and he began to speak clearly. He put his saliva in the eyes of a man from Bethsaida and laid his hands on him and restored his sight. When he crossed the Galilean Sea, the people in the land of Gennesaret rushed to carry their sick to him on pallets so that they might touch the fringe of his robe as he walked by, and all who did were healed. In none of these stories of Jesus' interactions with foreigners does he ask, "Where's your citizenship? Do you have a green card? Do you worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Do you accept me as the Messiah?" Jesus talked with strangers, not with suspicion and mistrust, not with judgment and contempt, not with an attitude of superiority, but with compassion and with curiosity. In his book, 10 Things They Never Told Me About Jesus, John Bell writes, "One of the greatest strengths of the Christian faith is that its founder recognized that faith was not the property of one sect, but a potential in all people." Jesus was genuinely interested in the strangers that he encountered, eager to share what he had to offer with them, and eager to receive what they had to offer him. His fundamental orientation to strangers was not one of fear, but of trust. As we heard in the reading this morning from Luke's Gospel, Jesus was so enamored by the experiences that he had talking with strangers that he made up a parable about a stranger who became a hero to a Jewish man who had been robbed and beaten and left for dead by the side of the road. One of the most famous of all the parables Jesus told was about a good Samaritan who not only talked to a stranger, but stopped and rendered aid and bandaged his wounds and transported him to shelter and paid for all of his expenses while recuperating from his injuries. Our culture tells us not to talk with strangers. They're dangerous. They can't be trusted. They don't share our values. They don't share our beliefs. They don't share our aspirations. And that fear constricts our world. It closes us off to all of the people, all of the experiences, all of the opportunities that are unknown to us. But Jesus invites us to engage strangers not out of fear, but out of trust. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, says the letter to the Hebrews. For in doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. Amen.